Ship traffic has halted again in the Strait of Hormuz after President Trump ordered the U.S. military to begin a naval blockade of all Iranian ports and coastal areas starting today at 10 a.m. Eastern. Iran denounced Trump's move as an illegal act amounting to piracy. Iran has threatened to strike Gulf ports in retaliation. Trump ordered the blockade after the U.S. and Iran failed to reach a deal to end the war following 21 hours of talks in Islamabad, Pakistan. The negotiations mark the highest-level talks between the two countries since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance headed the U.S. delegation, which included U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Iranian negotiators had flown to Pakistan on a plane they called Minab 168 as a tribute to the 168 people killed in a U.S. missile strike on an elementary school in the city of Minab on February 28th. The plane carried images of the dead school children, along with blood-stained school bags recovered beneath the rubble. Global oil prices jumped after Trump announced the blockade. We're joined now by Ervand Abrahamian, Professor Emeritus of History at the Graduate Center at the City University of New York, the author of several books, most recently Oil Crisis in Iran, From Nationalism to Coup d'etat. His forthcoming book, 1979, An Inevitable Revolution. So your response to what transpired in Pakistan, the deal that was not reached between Iran and the United States, and what this means, Professor?
Well, I think both sides actually presented basically ultimate demands which the other side couldn't accept. So it was a false start. But the implications of the failure is going to be actually quite drastic on the United States, because Trump's main concern has been to actually put a lid on the oil prices going up. And they've already jumped from $88 a barrel to over $100. They're going to increase more with the present crisis, with the embargo on the Straits of Hormuz. And as the crisis escalates, I think the U.S. will start bombing Iranian oil installations. Iran will retaliate by bombing the Gulf oil installations, gas installations. The oil prices then could really zoom up. Some people expect it to reach $200 a barrel. In that case, it will have long-term implications for Wall Street and the whole American economy, not to mention the world economy. So things that Trump has tried to avoid, he's got actually himself into the major crisis, economic crisis.
You have Robert Malley, who had previously been involved with talks with Iran, saying, quote, 21 hours was 20 hours too many if the goal was to reiterate a demand Iran had already rejected. It was many hours too few if the goal was to negotiate. Your response?
He's exactly right. And I think, what Iran sees as the present crisis is an existential one, because although the talk has been regime change, the Israeli policies clearly in the last 10 years has been more than regime change. It's basically been the destruction of the Iranian state, Iranian nation. So Iran sees this as an existential threat. There was a speech that Trump made when he launched the attack on Iran a couple of weeks ago. It was actually quite an interesting speech. He talked about various ethnic minorities being oppressed in Iran, and they were dying to be liberated from Iranian control. And he listed obvious ethnic groups, but then there was one ethnic group that really I'd never heard of. So I scratched my head, what is this group? And I did what most people do, you Google. And lo and behold, this ethnic group actually exists in the other side of the Caucasus Mountains in Dagestan. So you wonder what reason they had for putting this ethnic group that doesn't exist in Iran as one of the ethnic groups, unless there's some sinister idea the Israelis have of a civil war in Iran where they will recruit actually mercenaries from the other side of the Caucasus to bring into Iran. Of course, this sounds far-fetched, but this is what actually happened in Syria. You had a lot of Chechens actually brought in to fight against Assad. So the Israelis may be thinking in those terms of actually a long civil war in Iran where they would be bringing in mercenaries from outside. So for this reason, I think Iran sees this as a real serious existential war. It's not just a question of a minor sort of fine-tuning of relations with the United States.
You've written about oil in Iran a great deal. Ghalibaf, the Speaker of Iran's parliament, tweeted on Sunday, enjoy the current pump figures. With the so-called blockade, soon you'll be nostalgic for $4 to $5 per gallon gas. Yeah.
I mean, the price could go up to $200 a barrel, even more than that, if basically the Gulf oil, it's not just Iranian oil, but the whole Gulf oil and gas is actually cut off from the world market.
So let's talk about what Iran wants right now and what the U.S. wants. 10 o'clock a.m., we're broadcasting right before that. Eastern time is when the U.S. Navy blockades, apparently, the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. What exactly this means, how will the Gulf nations be affected? How will Iran be affected? Because it both exports oil, but of course, it needs oil and it makes a great deal of its own oil.
Yeah, I mean, it won't break Iran because Iran has other ways of actually exporting oil. It'll obviously be a hardship, but it'll be a much worse hardship on the Gulf states if Iran actually dismantles their oil installations. And that affects directly United States economy because so much of Gulf oil money, gas money, actually goes into high-tech United States. And much of the American, modern technology is funded by subsidies from the various Gulf states. So it would have drastic repercussions on U.S. economy.
What does Trump want? His latest, and what Vance said, right? Vance leaves the Hungarian prime minister campaigning for him, Orban, who is soundly defeated, and then goes to Islamabad to lead this negotiation. He says it's all about nuclear weapons. Vance said, the simple fact is we need an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon. They will not seek the tools that will enable them quickly to achieve a nuclear weapon. Your response?
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly what the Obama agreement was.
That Trump pulled out of.
Yes, which Trump pulled out. But if you look at that agreement, basically it said Iran had the right to enrich, but it had to be supervised to make sure it couldn't enrich to the level of nuclear weapons. So Netanyahu claims it was vague agreement. In fact, it was very precise. Iran could enrich to 3.67% of uranium. That's as precise as you can get. It was limited to 200 grams of enriched uranium, and also it was everything was supervised. There were 140 international monitors, including American monitors. So this was an incredibly tight procedure to make sure that Iran would actually fulfill its promise not to go into nuclear weapons. When Trump pulled out of that, he basically unwound the whole system. And the best he can get is going back to that. So demand that Iran should have no nuclear enrichment is a non-starter. The best he could get is go back, permit Iran to have enrichment, but with on monitoring that it would not be weapon enrichment.
We just have a minute. In a call with the Russian President Putin, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian said a deal is, quote, not out of reach. So if you can talk about where you see this all headed.
Well, there are people in Iran, basically in the National Security Council, including Pezeshkian, who think that they can make a deal with the United States. And they've been there a long time. But there are also people now, I think, hardliner, who are stronger now than before the war, who are arguing that you can't make a deal with Trump. Even if he makes a deal with Trump, makes a deal, he could the following week decide he's going to pull out. So it's a non-starter from their point of view, unless U.S. can actually make full commitments. And I don't see how they can do that, because Trump is basically untrustworthy. So from their point of view, I think the hardliners in Iran could argue persuasively the more the pressure they have, the more the prices are going to go up. The more it goes up, sooner or later, the patient will have a heart attack or a stroke. So they have an upper hand at the moment.
Ervand Abrahamian, I want to thank you so much for being with us, Professor Emeritus of History at the Graduate Center at City University of New York, author of several books, most recently Oil Crisis in Iran, his forthcoming book, 1979, An Inevitable Revolution.